My mommy always said there were no monsters, no real ones, but there are.
Yes, there are, aren't there?
What did they tell little kids then?
Most of the time it's true.
Did one of those things go inside her?
I don't know, Newt. That's the truth.
Isn't that how babies come? I mean, people babies, they go inside you.
That's very different.
Did you ever have a baby?
Yes, I did. I had a little girl.
Where is she?
She's gone.
You mean dead?
From the beginning it had been the dreams, the visions of monsters in the dark, leading a path to light, to the mother. Hicks and Newt had attributed the nightly terrors to their past trauma on Acheron, a mental scarring left more vivid and deep than any wound suffered from the burns of the alien's acid blood. But others on Earth began sharing these dreams and hearing the call. The cultists, who freed bionational specimens, believed them to be a spiritual calling, an invitation to join a higher purpose, to belong. Now the Earth belonged to the alien, to her. Ripley spoke little of her years in exile, but the dreams were consistent. 15 years, maybe enough time for a professional dreamer to interpret their meaning. The dreams were transmissions, not meant for the human race, but received nonetheless. She had heard the complete transmission intercepted by the Nostromo decades prior. She had felt the call of the mother. Ripley considered the details of her final conversation with the android, Ash, the traitor, aboard the Nostromo. He had asked if she made an attempt to communicate with the alien. It seemed impossible. But now, she and her new crew, aboard the Kurtz, were following the call to the true planet of origin, to the Queen of all aliens. Hicks leaned over Farrell's shoulder and scanned the readout on the planet. Atmosphere's breathable, but just barely, he said. High in contaminants, low in oxygen. Could be worse, said Hicks. Bulking around out there in a climate suit would be a bitch. The navigator nodded in agreement. Plenty of water, almost 80% ocean and plenty of lakes. Nasty too, full of trace elements and probably local bugs. Drinking it wouldn't do you any good. Hicks leaned closer. Gravity was almost half a G higher than Earth's. Good thing their crew was a strong group physically. Don't drink the water, don't breathe the air. Huh? Old joke. What else? He said. Weather, plants, animals. It's windy, said Farrell. At least in the mountainous regions. Landing should be a thrill. Vegetation must live on heat and poison, because the sun don't shine much through the cloud cover. It won't be pretty. Got to be some animals, though I haven't seen any. Hicks heard that. Fucking monsters had to eat something. It could be worse, but they're about to set down on a hot, wet, poisoned planet where jogging would be an effort for the strongest of them. To try to overpower the almighty top-of-the-heap queen fucking head alien on her own ground. Great. Well, hey, no problem. The Marines were lean, mean, and obscene. Yeah, right. Okay, he said. See if you can pinpoint the warmest areas for the flyby tomorrow. He leaned against the wall and watched Farrell dig for the information. The Mother Queen had no doubt picked a charming spot to build her home, and she probably wouldn't want to move without a fight. Another bad place to die. And as he had thought so many times before, it was probably going to happen this trip. The universe could only pass out so much luck to any one guy, and he'd sure as shit gone through his share a long while ago. Well, what the hell. If it was your turn, there wasn't anything you could do. If it wasn't, he guessed he would find out soon enough. Ripley stood in the loading dock and looked at the people assembled in front of her, watched them absorb the information that Farrell and Hicks laid out. They were in orbit around what sounded like hell. The Kurtz would land and drop off the APC, in which some of them would go check things out, then report back. Everyone agreed it was the best action before coming up with a final plan, to be certain of what they were up against. Must be getting mellow with age, she thought. There was a time when waiting to do anything would have been out of the question. Hicks and Farrell wrapped up their presentation and turned to look at Ripley. She knew what was expected of her. Well, she said. Anyone dream of the Queen last night? The crew members looked at each other and shook their heads. Apparently no one had. Does that mean she knows we're here? Said Dunstan. Maybe so. Or it could just mean she overshot us. Hard to say. Dunstan nodded, as did several of the others. You know about this place, Ripley said. I wouldn't ask anyone to do anything I'm not prepared to do myself, so I'll be on that APC, and I'm asking for volunteers. Most of you have been in combat situations, but some of you are physically stronger and have a better chance out there. You need to make the decision, not me. However, some of you will have to stay aboard the ship. McQuaid and Brewster, as pilots, I don't see how we can risk losing either of you, since I'll be down there. Brewster cut in. Hey, I'm ready for this. McQuaid can fly this ship. Look, I'm not saying you're not capable, Brewster. We need you here. Besides, there has to be somebody to pick up the pieces if we fuck up. Got it? Yeah, he said, in a tone of voice that said he didn't get it at all. Tough shit, thought Ripley. Farrell, the combat green navigator, would be staying aboard as well. There was silence for a moment. Fox stood up. I'm going, he said. Ripley had assumed that he would volunteer. She nodded at him. Okay, Fox, welcome aboard. Dunstan and Carvey stood at the same time. Tully followed, as did Newt. Hicks stepped away from Farrell and joined the others. Ripley held up a hand. Stop there, she said. Like I said, we need a backup crew in case anything happens to us. And if we all go, there's no room for weapons. Newt, you stay. I'm going, she said, voice calm. The determination in the young woman's eyes was firm. Ripley hesitated, then nodded. All right, she said. She turned to McQuaid and gave him the go-ahead. He walked to the front of the group and started to explain how the loader suits worked. Ripley looked at her crew. Good people, all of them. This could work. It had to work. Hicks stood in the control room with McQuaid, Brewster, and Farrell and watched them look at the readings on the landing sites. They were 20 minutes from drop and he could feel the adrenaline seep into his system when he looked through the shield. Once more he was going to face off with the monsters. As long as there were any of them left, or he could still breathe, that was going to keep happening, but it didn't seem to get any easier. You'd think he'd be used to it by now. Brewster picked up a cluster of erratic movement in the southern hemisphere, which coincided with Farrell's reading of warmest temperature. They would head there first. No one was betting whether or not she would be there. Everyone seemed to know. Still, they had to be as prepared as they possibly could be. Armaments aside, it was Ripley's idea to equip the team with mecha-suits, customized from power loaders. At least they stood a chance in suits modified for military service. Ripley was alone in her quarters as the others were suiting up. Newt came to find her, hearing her sighs as she approached the open entrance. I'm sorry, honey. Newt made her presence known as she noticed Ripley wiping away tears with an old photo in hand. Ripley, they're ready. She composed herself. Yeah, fine. I'll be there in a minute. She rose up, leaving the photo on the foot of the bed. I hope they sectored the APC's comlink. Those low-frequency jobs tend to scatter at the first sign of... Jesus. Newt involuntarily cut her off with her gasp. Ripley, is that a picture of your... My daughter. It was taken a couple of weeks before I reported aboard the Nostromo. She was beautiful. Amanda. I spent her whole life drifting through empty space, lost in years of perfect hibernation, while she grew old and died. Newt nodded, half remembering a conversation in her youth on Acheron. She knew that part of it at least. Ripley had spent decades in deep sleep. She held the record, as far as anybody knew. It had been a lucky accident that she'd been found at all, drifting through dead space. Newt wondered what it must have been like, to leave a child and come back to find she had died as an old woman. A daughter, older than your own grandmother. Awful. After all these years, I've never stopped thinking about her. Her whole life passing by while I slept, and the dreams of another mother who wanted her children back. Ripley shook her head and smiled. There was no humor in the expression. Funny comparison. Me and that monstrous creature both wishing for the same thing. This whole plan, I didn't have any kind of revelation about what to do, no brilliant inspiration. I just loved my daughter and I miss her, and I blame that thing for taking her away. She looked up at Newt, her eyes angry. My idea didn't come from wanting to save anyone. No great love for humanity. I just hate her and her whole fucking brood, and I want them exterminated. The aliens stole the time we should have had together. Sometimes I think those things have as much right to survive as any of us. Sometimes I wonder what gives us the arrogance to challenge their existence. Then I look at my little girl, and I know. Tully had just finished welding braces around one of the hold's 2 exit hatches. McQuaid was still working on the other one. Ripley stood with her arms crossed and waited for the alloy's glow to die down. The air stank of burned metal and plastic. "If that doesn't hold it shut, nothing will," she said. They were going in a few minutes, and the tension of the crew showed in their tight expressions, but Ripley felt surprisingly calm. McQuaid snapped off his welder. "Done," he said, a little too loudly. Ripley nodded at him. She had thought she would be a lot jumpier by now. Her relaxed state was almost disconcerting. But it wasn't like a lack of concern. It was more like fulfillment, she thought. Being where I'm supposed to be. After she checked the hatches, Ripley followed the other 2 back to the upper deck. The hatches looked solid enough and were certainly the best they could do, but this wasn't some drone. She would have to hope that the queen bitch wasn't going to be too much for them to handle. She had dealt with ordinary queens, and they were bigger, stronger, and meaner than drones. She hoped the Queen of Queens wasn't that much worse. No matter. It was what they had. Now the crew strapped into their seats. Newt offered her a quick and nervous smile as Ripley walked to the front around the control area's partition. Hicks adjusted a strap on one of the secondary chairs. Ripley moved up to Pilot 2 and sat. Hicks looked at her. "Hey, Ripley. We ran a matrix on the movement in the southern hemisphere, in case we have to land there." "No, in case," she said. "She's there. You know it." Hicks shook his head and grinned. "Okay, probably. We'll know soon enough. Anyway, Farrell picked up rock formations like you wouldn't believe. It's going to be tricky. There's a little wind, too." Brewster turned from the console and nodded at Hicks. "If it was easy, anybody could do it. Besides, topography's the APC's problem. All I gotta do is drop you off." Ripley let the bitterness slip past. Brewster was obviously still pissed that he wasn't going to attend their scouting party. "Yeah, but flying's going to be a bitch. Glad you're at the helm, Brewster. Hotshot like you shouldn't have too many problems." Brewster didn't reply, but Ripley saw him relax slightly. Good. They were going into harm's way, and the last thing she needed was a smarmy pilot. Tully spoke up. "Carvey and I sectored the APC's comlink," she said, "so you don't have to worry about scattering." "Great," said Ripley. She looked at the readouts in front of her and felt her hands start to clench. The lack of tension she'd felt wasn't going to last now that there was nothing left to do but sit and wait. "I guess we're ready," she said. The drop to the mother's planet had begun. No one spoke for some time. Newt was lost in thought and conflict. "I've been thinking about Earth. I never really considered it my home. I feel I've been adrift all these years, searching. It's the same for all of us. Ripley, Hicks, the alien. It's funny. We see them as intruders on Earth, taking something precious away from us, but maybe we're the intruders. Maybe their search is over, and the Earth was meant to be theirs all along. My entire life had been in preparation for this moment, and yet I was suddenly filled with a sense of dread. It was wrong. It was all wrong. It wasn't the thought of death that frightened me. It was our reason, our purpose, duty, honor, a little girl named Amy. We all wanted to believe in our gallant justifications, but the truth is never so simple. Ripley's dreams, my nightmares, were they really the reasons that brought us here? Or were they her lures? Maybe we hadn't come to the aliens' world of our own accord. Maybe we'd been sent. The closer we came, the more I felt the aliens' presence, the more I knew it felt mine. Newt gripped the armrests of her chair, eyes tightly closed. Her stomach was knotted in the usual lurch of freefall. This was a feeling she didn't think she'd ever get used to. Hicks leaned his head around the partition, expression tense. "Local winds look to be pushing 130 knots, he said. and that's down below the jet stream. Better button up before it gets rough." The flight smoothed out, became almost calm. Carvey and Falk unbuckled and moved to one of the ports. What the hell, Newt thought, and stood to join them. They broke out of the cloud cover into the most desolate place Newt had ever seen. The ship moved too fast to get a good look, but as far as she could tell, it was all the same. Pools of shallow gray water stretched for clicks, broken up and surrounded by dirty humps of rock. Clumps of colorless vegetation, much of it apparently fungal, towered at the edges of the water. Some strange variety of beige moss seemed to cover everything. Off in the distance, Newt saw impossibly tall stands of rock scattered randomly in the endless dark sea. Nice place. She turned away. "We'd better head down to the APC," she said. "Right," said Carvey. He started toward the stairs, followed by Falk and Dunstan. "Christ, what a place," said Brewster. "Maybe I'll take my vacation here." He navigated through the strange environment. Crosswinds buffeted the vessel hard enough to rock it. Hicks stared. Yeah, this was without a doubt the most god-awful planet he'd ever seen. He could almost feel the thick wetness of the air around the ship, smell the dead chemical odor of alkaline water. Just looking at this nightmare gave him the creeps. Brewster interrupted his thoughts. "I got a spot scout where it seems relatively calm, not far from the main cluster of movement." No one spoke for a moment. "Take it or leave it, folks. I can't dick around for long in this damn wind," said Brewster. "Take it," said Ripley, and stood up. "Come on, Hicks, let's go back with the grunts." The others were crowded around the APC in the dock. Hicks motioned for the rest of the crew to get on, and boarded last. He watched everyone strap in before he moved to the front. Newt sat at the console. She would monitor outside activity as they got closer to the motion Brewster had picked up. A voice crackled out over the intercom. "Hey kids, almost there," said Brewster. "Farrell says movement has stopped, but it seemed to be coming from a formation almost due west from where we're dropping you. That's 272 heading, to be exact." "Rock formation?" said Newt. "Negative. Looks organic. Listen, Carvey, you still owe me money, so be careful, okay? Goes for the rest of you, too." "Got it," said Newt. "Thanks, Brewster," Hicks said. "On your go." Hicks keyed the controls for the machine and checked the navigational. Everything looked fine. The mobile unit was built like a chunk of lead on wheels, designed to move over any terrain, if not comfortably, at least efficiently. The front view screen gave a good shot of outside, currently the inside of the dock. There was also a small clear steel shield that offered a more limited view. There were recoilless guns mounted on the pivotal up top, as well as in the front. This was supposed to be a check. With any luck, he wouldn't have to use them. "Stand by," said Brewster in a burst of static. Hicks tensed. Ready. The dropship touched down. Hicks rolled his head with the sudden impact, felt the planet's surface grind and crunch beneath the ship. The APC slid forward as the deck dropped out on metal struts, the hatch opening outward. "Go." Hicks grabbed the control stick and eased the APC off the extended ramp and into the water. There were scattered rocks and weird vegetable growths here and there, but essentially they were looking at an ocean less than a meter deep. Here, anyway. It surrounded them in every direction as far as he could see. Wind rippled the surface into a shifting washboard, occasional gusts blowing spray from the tiny whitecaps. The APC's rear wheels pulled off the deck and they settled into the liquid with scarcely a bump. "Good job," said Hicks. "We're down. And welcome to town, folks." "And we are out of here," said Brewster. The sounds of the ship as it lifted were loud even inside the APC. Brewster and the others would head back up, above the winds, and wait for the pickup call. If there's anybody left to send it, thought Hicks. There was something wrong. He felt in his gut, but they were there, and it was time. "Let's go see if the Queen's home," he said. The APC rumbled forward. From the position of the cam on the APC, it was nearly impossible to tell exactly what it was they were headed toward. The screen showed nothing but water and sky, close enough in color to be nearly indistinguishable. It was like moving through a void. Newt mostly kept her gaze on the motion sensors and the Doppler screen, where she had something to report. "We got 6 roughly spherical objects, approximately 20 meters apart and arranged in a circle. Largest measures may be 30 meters high. It's centered inside the others," she said. Newt pushed her hair off her sweaty forehead. The APC's coolers could only do so much against the wet heat of the planet that pressed in on them. They wobbled and bumped as the APC made its way slowly through the water. "Level my ass," Hicks said. "I'd like to see Brewster's idea of rough terrain." It all felt like a dream to Newt, and her heart thumped hard and loud enough she was surprised nobody noticed. "Hicks, this is supposed to be a scouting trip, right? Why are we headed straight to her nest? Shouldn't we find somewhere safer to observe? Look around. Where do you suggest?" "I'm just saying that we can scope things out a little more thoroughly. Try a probe." "Listen, kid, we're not going to drive this thing into her front door. We're just going to pull up nearby and see what happens, okay? If the probes we had were worth a shit, I'd send one, but none of the robots we got can do the job." Newt nodded, but continued to worry. "It doesn't feel good, Hicks," she said. His lips tightened. "Yeah," he said. "I copy that." Newt sighed. She and Hicks had been here before. Not this place, but this kind of situation. Somehow that felt a little comforting. Between the two of them, they'd pulled off some pretty scary deals. "ETA 2 minutes, she said. "We'll be ready," Ripley called out from behind her. Newt wanted to go back and talk to Ripley about her fear. Maybe there was some kind of psychic thing going on. Suddenly the APC ground to a halt with a jarring crunch. The unit tilted to the left, throwing Newt back into her chair. "What the fuck?" began Falk. Ripley held her hand up for silence. "Hicks, Newt, what do we have?" Newt ran the diagnostic. "We bent one of the aft axle struts, but I think that's it," said Newt. Her voice sounded shaky. "What did we hit?" said Dunstan. Hicks called out over his shoulder. "Don't know, something underwater. Treads lifted and we lost traction. Hang on, let me see if we can rock back off it." The APC's engines rumbled. It took a few seconds, but Hicks managed to pull free of the obstruction. "Okay, we're clear." Then, take a look at the screen. Ripley looked up at the vid screen and inhaled sharply as the picture panned left. They were less than 100 meters from a huge round orb sitting in the murky water, pinkish-gray in color with strange lines crisscrossing the surface. "Like veins," thought Ripley. A long, thick cord connected to another orb, larger. The one they were closest to was the length of the APC and maybe twice as high. "I think we ran over something connected to that thing," said Hicks. "Newt? Is anybody home?" Ripley asked. "No movement. If they're around, they must be asleep. Look, I think we should back off a little. I don't feel so great about this." Ripley frowned. "We're here. If they heard that knock and they're still not coming, I think we'll be all right for a minute." They all watched the screen with intense concentration. Nothing happened. Ripley half expected to see a horde of giant insects launch themselves from behind the weird orbs and attack. She looked at Newt. The girl was watching the sensor readouts closely. No movement. It was Falk who broke the silence. "Let's go have a peek. What say?" He stood, picked up a comm set, hooked it over the back of his head, and reached for a boot to one of the mecha-suits. Dunstan also stood. Ripley shook her head. "I think we should wait. Maybe nudge one of them, with the APC first," she said. "We don't know what we're dealing with here." Falk continued to suit up. "Isn't that why we came?" he said. "To find out?" Carvey got up and helped Dunstan buckle on one of the lift boots before he grabbed a third suit. "It's a good idea," said Carvey. "We'll just hop out and have a look. We've got weapons, we're armored, and the APC's right here. We're out there 5 minutes, tops." Ripley thought about it. They knew what the aliens were capable of. They weren't going to be charging out there ignorant of what could happen. And Carvey had a point. They were as prepared as they were going to get. It was no crazier than the whole mission, which made less sense every time she thought about it. "Okay," she said. "No," said Newt from behind them. "Ripley, don't let them go. This isn't going to work. Can't you feel it?" Dunstan stepped forward, awkward in the suit. Hydraulics whined, the boots clumped heavily as he moved. "Newt," he said, his voice calm. This is a choice. We made the decision to come here. This is part of it. Something in his face, perhaps the acceptance of fate, stopped Newt from protesting any further. She turned and moved back to the front without another word. The 3 men, fully suited, stood by the door and looked to Ripley for their cue. They each wore thick vests with head protectors, jointed metal running the length of their limbs. Each carried their standard military carbines, the same 10mm caseless weapons Ripley had learned to use. "Listen to your sets," she said. "Newt is monitoring the cluster. Any sign of trouble, get back here. We don't want any dead heroes. Good luck." She paused for a moment. What else is there to say? Nothing. "Go," she said. The hatch slid open. Hicks felt the blast of damp heat as the door slid shut. The smell was like he'd imagined, but worse, like rotten, poisoned food. The wind made the exposed edges of the hatch whistle. He breathed through clenched teeth and watched the screen. Newt was pallid and tense beside him, but she also watched the readouts carefully. Hicks wished he were out there with the others, but he tried to let it go. He was the best APC driver they had, and if anything went wrong, they'd want to leave in a hurry. "Fuck, talk to me," he said. "We're moving toward it, maybe 30 meters away now. We'll stay on this side of it." Fox's transmission was clear. "Christ, it fucking stinks," said Carvey. "You're missing out, Hicks. Wish I'd thought to bring a kite. Wind must be gusting to 100 clicks out here." 115, Hicks said. The figures approached the sphere. Their boots rose and fell in the muck that came up to their knees, spatters of it blowing away in the gusts. They separated a few meters from the orb. Falk remained in front while Dunstan and Carvey moved to the sides. "Don't get too far apart," said Hicks. The 3 men stopped. "Stay in sight of each other." "There's goop all over this thing," said Carvey. "Like, jelly. Seems to be emanating from the formation's core, that from Dunstan." "What are these things?" Carvey said. "They're too big to be egg sacs. I hope they're too big to be egg sacs. Whatever the hell it is, it's oozing like a son of a bitch. I can almost see inside." He raised a mechanical limb to touch it. Newt gasped, and Hicks felt his heart catch. "Oh fuck, movement," she said. "Everybody get out of there now," Hicks shouted. "It's coming from inside the pods," said Newt into the comm. "Move. Get away." The 3 figures on the screen stumbled back as the nearest pod opened like a giant egg sac and a huge, glistening shape rose from it. A queen-sized drone, bigger than any Hicks had ever seen, snapped out one powerful claw so fast Carvey hardly saw it move and lashed onto his head protector. The monster raised Carvey into the air like a child with a toy. "Fuck, Jesus, get it off! Get it off me!" Carvey's cries were cut abruptly as the drone used its other claw and ripped his throat out. The creature tossed the handful of flesh away and pulled one of Carvey's arms off. Tossed that away too. Newt observed the brutal murder on the vid screen, tears streaming down her face. "Those power loaders are built out of alloyed steel, and they're tearing them apart like tissue paper." "The goddamn things must have evolved," mused Hicks. "The question is, how much?" "We're coming," Ripley yelled into her comm, but the 2 men were already slogging quickly backward toward the APC. "Go, Hicks. I'm on the guns." Falk looked back in disbelief at the drone as it continued to disembowel Carvey. "Well, I think we found them." Hicks jammed the APC into full throttle. Newt slammed her fist against the console. Fuck. Oh, fuck. The other pods. Ripley was bringing the APC's guns online when she heard Newt. "Come on," she shouted to Hicks. The APC lurched forward, only to hit another stop. The engine whined noisily. "Dunstan!" It was Falk yelling. Ripley looked up at the view screen as an alien leaped over one of the pods and pounced at Dunstan. He fell onto his back with a splash, absorbed the shock of the huge drone, and slammed his weapon into its belly. Falk struggled to get a clear shot as the APC suddenly moved forward again. "Die!" shouted Dunstan. Nothing happened. His weapon must have jammed. He raised his free arm, used a mechanical clamp to hold the alien's head away from his own. It shrieked and opened its gigantic jaws. With a jerk, it shoved its head forward. The steel armor crumpled like paper as its inner mouth snapped out and speared Dunstan's face. Bright red splashed into the water and he fell limp. "Motherfucker!" yelled Falk, and opened up on the drone. The crash of gunfire shredded the alien. The area around the fallen creature hissed and bubbled as its blood ate the water. What fell on Dunstan didn't matter. Falk disappeared from the screen as the APC came to a stop, drenching Falk with a splash in the process. The drone was quick behind. All right, I'm here. Don't make me knock, for Christ's sake," said Falk through the comm. Tully stood behind the door, weapon raised. Newt slammed the entry button and Falk fell inside, gasping. The hatch closed. "Thanks for the shower," said Falk, still catching his breath. Tully lowered her weapon, attention turned to her old friend. "I'll toss you a towel when we're back in orbit." Falk began removing the mecha-suit, shaking his head in disbelief. What the hell were those things? They're faster and stronger than anything we found on Earth, and I thought they were pretty tough. The drone tore through the hatch with its head, apparently still in pursuit of Falk. Ripley grabbed Tully's weapon and fired, blowing the beast's head apart. "They're her chosen few," she observed. "They're trying to protect her." "Emergency dust-off, now," said Newt. She held her comlink headset in place with shaky fingers. "We can't put down at your current position," said Brewster. His voice was anguished. "We got a Force 3 hurricane wind aloft here. Get away from the nest. Get closer to the initial drop point." "Shit," said Newt. "Newt, are you okay? Where's—" "No time, Brewster," said Hicks. "Get moving. We'll be there ASAP." Newt discommed and turned to Hicks. The aliens were so much bigger and stronger than before. Before she could speak, something hammered against the APC wall, hard enough to dent metal. Newt scanned the readouts. 3 of them, she said. The entire unit was lifted and tipped backward before it fell forward with a crash. The vid screen went black and mud splashed a clear steel window. Metal groaned. Something snapped with a bell-like crack. "Hicks," Newt said, in barely a whisper. She looked at the readout without blinking, hoped that it was wrong. Our internal cooling system just opened. Even as she watched, the temperature was going up. "It's going to get hot in here. Crappy warranty on these things." Hicks checked the monitor. "Ripley, we got some problems up here." There was no answer. Ripley belted the vest and nearly fell when the APC tipped. She picked up Falk's gun and checked the ammo read. Hicks shouted something at her as she searched the floor for additional magazines. Everything was rolling. The clips slid under the supply compartment. "Ripley!" yelled Hicks again. She walked to the front in the bulky suit. Falk and Tully leaned against the wall that faced the door, weapons ready. "Fuck this," said Falk. "Let's burn out of here." Hicks turned around in his seat. He looked Ripley up and down. "Jesus," he said. "You're crazy. Just head for the drop site." "Can't. The manuals are shot, steering just about locked. Our reactor took a knock. We can go straight for about 10 minutes and then we're talking meltdown. Got any ideas?" "Yeah," said Ripley. "Use the APC's guns and hammer those 3 outside. Won't matter if the acid damages the APC now. Seal the hatch and take off full speed as soon as I'm out. I need a couple minutes to get to her nest." "And what are you gonna do when you get there? Invite her to fucking tea?" said Hicks. "I didn't come this far just to let her slip away," said Ripley. "If I can't capture her, I can kill her. I have to try. We'll finish it, one way or another. Listen, you know how I feel, how much you and Newt mean to me." An interruption from Falk. "Hey, screw it, Ripley. Save it for when you get back." Ripley grinned and walked back to the rear hatch of the APC. Hicks triggered the APC's guns. One of them was still operable. The uranium slug shattered the attacking aliens. "Clear," he said. "At the moment." "Good luck," Ripley said. The hatch opened and Ripley jumped out. "I'm showing several forms moving at high speed toward the APC," Newt said. Her mouth was dry. In spite of the heat, she felt cold all over. The blips on the screen wavered and jumped, moved closer. "I guess that means Ripley's plan is working," she said. Hicks didn't spare her a glance as he wrestled with the controls. Reactor halfway to critical. APC's about to be overcome by superbugs. Yeah, I'd say it's working. Any better and we could blow our brains out now and save those bastards the trouble. Should I call the Kurtz again? Not yet. We give Ripley her 5+ and keep going till this sucker suffers from a complete engine or axle lock. Then, she turned to look at him. Her vision was blurred from sweat. Haven't gone that far yet, he said. The APC rocked. Newt looked back at the sensor and then screamed. Jesus, said Hicks. A giant, dripping alien grin appeared on the other side of the clear still. The creature lifted huge, clawed hands up to the window, and with a muffled shriek plunged its head through the shield. The clear metal shattered inward, sprayed everywhere as the alien reached for Newt. Hicks grabbed for his weapon. The creature already had its claws on Newt. It hissed, its decayed breath filling the air as Hicks came up with his carbine. Everything was mired in time, creaking forward in slow motion and thick gravity. The explosion thundered in his ears. The drone seemed to fly backward with a cry of rage and pain. Acid spattered, bubbled, and smoked on the shards of the clear steel. The alien was gone. Oh shit, said Newt. Okay? Yeah. Hicks exhaled heavily and checked the motion sensor. One down, he said. Hot, noxious air washed over them. Newt had a small cut on her arm from the clear still, but that was it. That they hadn't been drenched with the bug's acid was amazing. Time to think about it later, Hicks told himself. He glanced at the APC readout to see the core temperature still rising. Of course, it could be worse. We could be out there, with Ripley. She tried to look in all directions at once, managed one. There was no immediate danger. She didn't believe that the drones would have left their queen unprotected, but the only motion around her was the gently swaying ocean. Doesn't mean it's going to stay that way. All of her senses were in overdrive. The putrid odor of the planet, combined with the heat and gravity, made her dizzy. Along with the fading sound of the APC, there was only the slosh of water against her legs. The fierce winds had suddenly dwindled to almost nothing. An alien's cry echoed through the dead air, but it came from the direction of the retreating transport. She turned and faced the cluster of nests. "It's just you and me now," she said. Ripley slowly splashed toward the orbs. She heard shots in the distance. "Bet we got one of your babies," she said. Her muscles were sore from the gravity. It felt like 100 kilos had been strapped to each limb. Even breathing was an effort. But she could feel the queen, the powerful aura of the bitch. Water splashed behind her. She faced the nest. I wonder how long they've been waiting. How long they've ached for release. God, I can feel you all around me. Silence. "Why don't you show yourself?" Ripley whacked the arm of her mechanical suit against one of the connecting cords. It rippled and swayed slightly. She felt a bitter anger rise up. "What the fuck is this? Why don't you come out here and tell me? Explain your worthless existence. What you did to the crew of the Nostromo. The soldiers from the Sulaco." She hit the cord again and moved closer to the center orb. "Explain Earth. Explain Newt. Explain my daughter." Ripley waited, breathing hard. Suddenly the huge sphere jerked. The translucent goo quivered. A long crack appeared at the top of the thing, pulsing slightly. It started opening. Ripley tapped her comm, never taking her eyes off the nest. "Kurtz, this is Ripley," she said quickly. "Zero my position and get your asses here." Brewster's fuzzy voice spoke into her ear. "I told Hicks, the wind has died down. Get that ship over my coordinates now." As she spoke, a blackness started to move up from the orb. A glossy, elongated shape, a skull easily 2 meters in length, raised up. 3 clawed digits wrapped over the lip of the crack, and then another 3. The queen slowly pulled herself up. She hissed at Ripley, drool falling from her jaws as she unfurled herself from her home. The queen, the mama of all mamas, come to receive her visitor. She was at least 8 meters long, her whipping bony tail making her 8 more. Her comb was sleek and wet. Several of her vertebrae arched outward like spines, ran down her back like a row of fingers. She had 4 arms. She was the biggest living creature Ripley had ever seen. The queen ducked her head forward and down, craned her obscene skull to get a better look at what had disturbed her. "That's right," said Ripley. She backed away from the advancing creature. "Come on out and have a look." "Core temperature's going up. Meltdown in 7 minutes," said Newt. Her body was still shaking, but she had managed to control the worst of it. "We're talking more than meltdown," said Hicks. "When that core burns through to the liquid fuel chamber, we're looking at an explosion." Hicks pushed at the controls and sighed. "Well, the engine and wheels still work," he said. "That means this thing probably keeps rolling until it blows. Time to leave this party. We'll have to make the drop site on foot. Take all the ammunition you can carry and move out, unless you want to cook here." "New readings at the outer perimeter," said Newt. She squinted at the motion sensor, then tapped the side of it, hard. "There's a wall of them, Hicks." Even as she spoke, a dozen or so lights flashed on the screen. "What?" Tully said. "They're running past us." "Mama is calling her children," Hicks said. Newt could barely fathom the number of moving creatures it would take to give that reading. "There must be thousands," she said. Her stomach knotted tighter. "Ripley." "She'll do what she has to," said Hicks. He stood and walked to the back. Newt looked through the open shield for a few seconds. The army of drones moved toward them like a sheet of rain, closer and closer. Dozens ran past the APC, headed back to the Queen. Newt could hear their shrieks over the rising whine of the transport. "It's almost suicide to get out," Tully said. "And what happened to the nice breeze we had?" "We know it's suicide to stay," said Newt. "Maybe the bastards are on autopilot or something, and they won't even notice us." Without another word, they walked back to Falk and Hicks. The two men handed them loaded weapons and extra clips. They all moved to the rear hatch. Newt searched for something to say, some last words, but there was nothing. Hicks hit the button and jumped out. A chorus of howls went up around the APC as Newt took a breath and leaped. Hicks, Newt, Tully, and Falk stood in a circle and faced outward. Scores of the drones loped past them without stopping, splashed through the shallow water toward their mother. If the chemical stench of rot, the heavy air, and the heat weren't bad enough, hundreds of the nightmare creatures streamed past them, making it closer to hell than Hicks ever thought he'd be. "Conserve ammo," he said, "and fire only at targets coming at us. Stay close." One of the drones veered toward Falk, reached out, claws hooked. He squeezed the trigger and sprayed the alien with a short burst. The thing fell into the water. 3 or 4 of the bugs stumbled over the dead creature, but kept running. Another monster howled, lunged at Hicks. He fired again. Falk cursed steadily behind them as more of the creatures stopped and were killed. Hicks knew they would never make the drop site. There was no way they could move amidst the army of mindless bugs and keep themselves covered. He aimed at one of the grinning drones as it looked in their direction and squeezed off a single round. The alien's head exploded. It collapsed into the water, which bubbled madly now with the acidic blood of its brothers. "We're not going to make it," Newt shouted. "Hicks, you know that we'll never make it to the drop site." Hicks pointed his weapon at another one and fired. 5 more minutes and the APC will detonate, he called back. "We'll fucking take them all with us." He squeezed his trigger over and over, and hoped that their ammo would last, until the white heat of the APC ended it all. Ripley continued to back away from the hissing Queen. It seemed like a long time before she heard a noise that drowned the bitch out. The sound of the Kurtz dropship moving in overhead was sweet music. "We'll bring her in as low as we can," cackled Brewster through her comm. And then... holy shit. "Quite the prize," said Ripley. "Open the containment chamber, and get close to me." "Yeah," said Brewster. "But if that wind picks up again..." The Queen refocused her attention on the thundering ship. She backed away from Ripley a step and let out a high-pitched mewling noise. "Pretty ship," said Ripley. "See the nice, pretty ship." She darted her gaze quickly to the descending ship and then back to the Queen. "Bitch want to go for a ride on the pretty ship?" The Queen didn't offer a reply. "Closer, Brewster. Come on." The Queen took another step backward, wagged her huge head, looked at Ripley, then the ship. The alien watched, but didn't try to follow her. As big as the ship was, Ripley couldn't believe the monster was afraid. Curious, perhaps, but the goddamn things never seemed to be afraid of anything. The creature hissed at her. Ripley swiped the mechanical arm across its jaw. With a shriek, the Queen leaped at her. The cargo bay was directly over her, the hatch open. Keeping her weapon pointed at the Queen, Ripley held her other arm up. The clamp on the suit opened and then closed on the metal, the other now in the Queen's jaws. She pulled herself up. It took a tremendous effort. Her arm felt like it was going to jerk out of its socket, even with the suit's augmentation. Ripley stumbled backward as the Queen extended her huge claws toward the slick alloy. The alien grasped at the edge of the door's frame and caught hold. "Up! Now!" Ripley screamed into the comm. The ship lifted. "Yeah, that's right, bitch. We're going for a little ride." The Queen pulled herself into the dock as Ripley ran toward the inner door. "Seal the outer hatch." The Queen screamed a sound of absolute fury as she started toward Ripley. Ripley spun back to look at the Queen and nearly closed hatch. She had to be sure. The Queen's dark tail lashed out and the tip of it reached Ripley by the door. It thrashed down, thumped against the protecting bars of the mecha-suit, bent the metal and stacked carbon fibers, smashed into Ripley's skull. The force of the blow knocked her sprawling. The chamber washed out. Tiny bursts of light flashed around the howling alien. Ripley shook her head as the Queen turned away from her, leaped at the hatch, and pounded on it. The trapped monster screamed for her freedom. Ripley hit the button that would get her out of danger. The door into the APC bay slid open. At the sound, the Queen turned. With her tail coiled behind her, she prepared to leap. Ripley fell into the clean air of the dock and jerked her legs after her. "Quick!" Farrell slammed the control. The door closed a split second before the Queen barreled into it. A muffled pounding started on the other side, but the reinforced metal held. Ripley leaned against the wall and pressed against her aching head, taking deep breaths. She never thought she would think the canned air of the ship was sweet, but it was. She was alive. And the Queen was hers. Farrell stepped forward and helped Ripley pull up the leggings of the suit. "Christ, Ripley, you did it," he said. Ripley winced as she pulled the metal boot off her left leg. "Yeah, hurry. We have to go get the others." "Brewster says we're getting the hell out of here." "What are you talking about?" said Ripley. "They're dead?" She suddenly felt dizzy. "No, the APC's gone critical. It'll blow in a few minutes. The squad's pinned down in one of the narrow valleys, and Brewster said it's too tight for pickup." Ripley ran to the stairs before he finished. She clambered up, ignored her body's mute cries of pain as she climbed into the control room. Brewster sat at the console, expression grim. "Ripley," said Brewster. "Glad you're... Get those people out now. Look, there's no way. I wish to God there was, but the wind is rising. There's no goddamn room, and no time." "Find a way," she said. "If we die, we die. What if it was you down there?" Brewster frowned. "Listen," he began. "No, you listen. You take it back, or I will." She pulled out her pistol and aimed at his forehead. No time for debate. He blew out a big breath. "Fuck it," he nodded. "Okay," he said. "Hold on." "Less than 100 rounds here," Fock yelled. "And I'm not looking forward to going toe-to-toe with these things." Newt moved closer to him and covered. Her head ached and pounded with the endless sound of explosions and shrieks. The air beat down on her. The world had become screams and death, and it was too much trouble just to stand up. She hoped Ripley had made it, that it wasn't all for nothing. She felt tears roll down her cheeks. A huge emptiness opened inside her gut as she took out another of the slavering aliens. She had been here before, and she hadn't gotten used to it, but she wasn't as afraid as she had been the last time. Fuck it. The creatures suddenly scattered, backed away from their small group. Hundreds of them howled at once, reached their arms up to the sky. It was deafening. Newt turned to Hicks, confused. He pointed upward, a tight grin on his scarred face. The dropship. She hadn't heard the engines, her ears overwhelmed with the alien shrieks and gunfire. Hicks grabbed her roughly, jerked her from under the drop path of the approaching ship. The aliens screamed, ran toward the descending vessel. Dozens of them were crushed into the murky liquid, smashed into the mud under the weight. The APC bay door was open. Ripley and Farrell stood on either side of the dock, holding onto metal struts. They pointed weapons past the four of them and fired continuously. Newt and Hicks ran toward the dock. Newt saw Ripley, was relieved to see she was okay. "I thought the bastard couldn't land here," yelled Hicks. As they stumbled into the bay, Newt looked over her shoulder. The aliens were running into the suppressive fire and falling to the sides of the ship by the score. Falk was right behind them. Hundreds of drones threw themselves at the closing lock as Ripley and Farrell hosed their fire through the narrowing gap. Just before it shut completely, a lunging creature stuck one clawed hand into the bay. The lock cycled shut and cut 2 of the drone's fingers off. They sizzled and hissed on the floor of the ship, burned smoking craters in the flooring. Ripley turned to Hicks to answer his question. "I convinced him to reconsider," she said. They were all pressed to the floor of the dock as the ship suddenly bounced and rocketed upward. "Brace yourselves. The APC will blow in a few seconds," Ripley yelled. The words sounded far away. Newt didn't hear the explosion, but the ship rocked violently around them. It tilted to one side, yawed impossibly. Newt and Hicks crashed sidelong into the wall. And then it was over. The ship straightened itself, smoothed out. Only the drone of the engines broke the silence. Newt took a huge gulp of air and began to sob against Hicks's chest. He stroked her hair gently and didn't let go. "It's okay. We made it. It's okay." Once again, they had outrun death. They had survived. And Ripley had found what she was looking for all these years. The shrieking was now absent, but she felt the anguish and isolation of the Queen, and couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. She faced the hold containing the monster, looking inside. "Say goodbye to your old world. You're with me now." In this series, I'm recounting the Earth War, as depicted in the Aliens comic series. The accounts are explored as originally published despite certain names, locations, and other events having been altered over time. For more on the Earth War, you can check out the Accounts of the Earth War playlist on the end screen, and stay tuned for the final video. As always, I'd like to thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it, and if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a like, and you can also subscribe for all the latest videos from the channel. A very, very special thanks goes out to WEYLAND YUTANI executives, EmYarUk, Mark Fox, and Lady Anne, part of the Patreon Hive. If you'd like to join the Hive and support the channel, check out my Patreon page for exclusive posts and contests. In the meantime, you can catch up with Alien Theory over social media. Follow @alien_theory on Twitter and @alientheoryyt on Facebook and Instagram for more. And until next time, this is Alien Theory, signing off.